the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A state of control.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. And this is a little bit different for us. We're here live at ISE 2023, and I have to first say hello to my co-host and my partner here at A State of Control, none other than Rich Fregosa.
Well, we're in meat space, right? Yeah, we talked it. We'll use the technical term. So, mellow Barcelona greetings from our Catalan province. So, no, it's good to be here. It's good to have a time. I have been running around quite a bit for AVNation, doing coverage for the show. So, this is my first chance to sit down all day. And what better way to sit down and talk with these chaps that I got in front of me?
And with us today on our show is Chris Deatrick. He is a product manager from AtlasIED. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Yeah. So we're here at ISE 2023. It's great that we have the opportunity to be in the Influencer Lounge. It's great for them to give us this great space for us to record. And why we're here is because the AV industry has really been advancing. Trade shows seem to be back. There's been a lot of crowds, very busy few days. We're not really going to focus on the show, but I think we're going to talk about the importance of being at trade shows and why, from a software perspective, from a programmer's perspective, why trade shows are really something that should be thought through and how manufacturers need these opportunities to meet with people like us, like Definitely. The other attendees. So. Rich has been moving around, as he mentioned, talking to a whole bunch of manufacturers. So Rich, what are some of the things that you've heard at the show, and what are some of the trends that are important to programmers?
Well, the first thing that I've noticed is that the crowds are back. It's the first time in 3 years where I'm walking through a hallway and it is shoulder to shoulder and you're working through and you kind of have that knee-jerk reaction of like, do I need to mask up again before I go through? I mean, so it's the feel of the big trade show again, but you still have a little bit of that PSD, of the PTSD of like, oh my God, I'm in this giant crowd of people again. But the overall show itself, I mean, everything's light. I mean, software's everywhere. Every booth that I've gone to has their own tool. That's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed is that they are all purpose-driven tools per manufacturer, which is, again, opening up that can of worms. I've gone to several manufacturers, which it makes sense because, manufacturers are determining that because of the hybrid world, it isn't necessarily about partnering with a speaker manufacturer or an amplifier manufacturer or a display manufacturer. It's about partnering with a soft codec. It's about their partnerships with Zoom, with Teams, with BlueJeans. And so there's been a shift in what I've seen on the floor where before, you would see a lot about the third-party development would be the biggest advertisement. Now the advertisements, or at least what they're presenting, is how they are looking to more tightly ingrain with a lot of the UC systems there. But they still don't answer some of the bigger questions when you get beyond kind of the sandbox that they've drawn. So it's interesting in that I see a lot of things moving in the right direction in that, some of the manufacturers are saying, hey, we do have instances in a front row situation where we can go ahead and use our tool. We have our own dedicated device, and maybe it's a web page interface or a purpose-built interface that we've got on a touch screen, and we're going to use that to work. And some of it's phenomenal stuff, but a lot of it looked like it was the engineering team that put it together and not necessarily the user experience team that put it together. So it's almost like the early generation of our touch panels that I'm seeing just a little bit sleeker. But it's an interesting move in the right direction because we are seeing, and we've said it for quite some time, about software eating the world. It's no longer about the knobs and flipping the switches and the LEDs. Now it's becoming about widgets. It's becoming about extensions. It's becoming about hook-ins to Google or Edge, or how do these show up with the codecs with a USB-C interface. So that's been the interesting part for me. And it's like everything else we've talked about, right? I see it as opportunity. I think that it's like anything else. It starts the okay, but conversation. It's like, you've got a tool. It's fantastic. Okay. But what about this? And so I think manufacturers are figuring it out too, which is we have to be able to present something for our users. We can't consider that they'll have the budget for a third-party control system. So they're looking at us, and so we need to be able to provide something, at least for that first step, to say, we'll get you from point A to point B. And so, I think that that's where I'm seeing is that it may even help us, because at that point they're saying, hey, look, if you do want to take it to the next level, then you've got to go down that road, which is a perfect segue. Yeah. So it's for a manufacturer developer.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it a few times over the last couple of days, which is take away all the stuff, the outputs, the displays, the audio, the amplifier, all that stuff. As a software person, like, what can I do? That's all I care about. Can I do this? Can I do that? I don't care about, like, if I bought that exact widget or if what did the thing for me. But as defining a product, doing a product development, product manager, when I think about how I'm going to design something going forward, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think that when you have, I want a widget that does Teams, or I want a widget that does Zoom, or I want a widget that integrates with X. And instead of coming from the bottom up, I guess is a way to say it, coming from the top down and just saying, this is how we want to define a product. This is how we want to release an API document out. These are the things that people want to do. And then you can figure out all of the manufacturer stuff,
Well, you're bringing up an interesting point, and one of the things that we want to say with Chris, I guess we need to properly introduce him, yeah. Which is, we're just jumping right in.
Yeah. That's what we always do.
Yeah, well,
first we have to define the term API, if you wouldn't mind, only because that's one of the AVNation rules.
Oh, really?
So an API,
application
if it's an
programming
acronym,
interface,
you got to spell it. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of the language that a product talks to other things.
Right.
So which is great. But so tell us a little bit about your background.
Sorry, I don't know where.
This is conversation. This is the way we do it.
So I'm a product manager. I did software for AtlasIED from 2004 to 2018. beginning of 2019, I became a product manager for the company. We didn't have a product management team at the time. Learned how to kind of define stuff. COVID hit, so the last 4 years now, it's been, we have a small product development team of 3 people, and whereas we had nothing before, and we're trying to give some boundaries around a growing, from traditionally manufacturer who just kind of, I remember when I started, they actually had the hardware engineers do the software, and it was, as you would expect.
Yeesh.
And so to start to put some definition around what you have to do, I mean, as an engineer, you can appreciate it more, because otherwise you're just off in nowhere land and not knowing if, I mean, I had I've developed several products where I from a software point of view, from an engineering point of view, developed the product, was told this was the product, people were going to buy this, did it, and then no one bought it. And then I didn't know if I was doing the right thing or if it was my fault or any of that stuff. And so I kind of, as time went on, I got a kind of a broader picture of the market and what it takes to go to market and stuff like that. And eventually became product management, and it's really helped me in this job.
And it's an interesting thing from the, I've had today I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of product managers, and it's interesting because it is a term that can mean a lot of different things based on what you're working on, where you're working, when you're bringing out a product or where you're refining a product, because you're straddling both worlds. Are you finding right now that we need a soft solution first that we present, that the hardware then fills in the gap? Or do you find that the call is we still need that box and now we need the software layer in between? Because from a manufacturing standpoint, that's always the challenge, right? Because you've got your customers, our dealers, who we work with, who are saying, we want something, but that's always the conflict, which is like, what do we give you? And we can't necessarily charge for it, but you're expecting it.
People, I've heard, we have an internal conflict, and I'm sure every manufacturer has the same internal conflict. You see Netflix or whatever it is charging whatever a month and being really successful, and I think that when you say I had a senior software engineer tell me about a month or two ago that every company is a software company, they just don't realize it yet. And so I've kind of thought about it on and off since then, and what he meant by that. And I think what it means is the push is there. Supply chains even increase that issue, right? Look at Dante, Audinate Dante. They're software, they're pushing the software, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to have to be dependent on something. When as a developer, I want to go in, sit down, make sure the thing works before getting. I'm going to sit down in a coffee shop. I don't want to sit down in a equipment room and code it.
So it's funny because the average control system programmer, usually programming comes last.
Yes.
So it's really encouraging, and I think a lot of people will find it very invigorating to hear that software drives products rather than the system is designed and then you program it to do something.
Yeah, that's what I was trying at the very beginning. I've been thinking about that the last week or two about how to define. I have to define a next generation ecosystem of some sort. How to define all of the things. It's almost impossible. But when you start saying, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and from a product point of view, it kind of flows in. You will need some sort of, to define some sort of XLR, and if I have 2 of them or 20 of them or whatever, at that point, sure. But from a software point of view, I don't really care. I just have, for I equals 1 to X, right, or whatever, and that's really what way I approached it in my head.
You mentioned before about products that you developed weren't necessarily well received.
Yeah.
From our standpoint, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you have to do that at least minimally viable product approach, and then
definitely.
iterate.
Right.
And that's something that we're still getting used to in the AV control programming world.
That's right.
Any advice as to how to go about doing that, approaching that? How did you handle that when that happened, and what changes did you make the next time?
That's one reason why I'm here, is going straight to the customer. And so when I sit there and I watch someone play with a device of some sort, and what are the commonalities of the questions they're asking? Oh, they're all asking about, can I have this? Well, that's probably that's probably part of the MVP. Whereas maybe one guy asked it because he has this one job in a hotel somewhere, that put that on the to-do list. And that's kind of how I'm approaching the problem, at least structurally, so that I can have some sort of MVP when I come out of all this.
So a lot of listening, coming up with an idea.
Coming up with an idea, and then having something that's different is, I think, a big key. I think a lot of engineers, and this is what I'm learning now, right? I was in engineering for years and doing product now. The engineers don't get exposed to the marketing and the sales side as much. And so to have this exposure and to see exactly like how people are selling it, and to see how it kind of fits in context with everything else. Is this really what the person that was developing it thought that they were doing? You know, there's a disconnect there, and so now I'm still learning some of that stuff. You know,
It's encouraging.
Yeah.
Rich, how could we apply this to our world?
Well, that's the question I'm going to lead in, and actually I'm going to toot your horn right now on this one. So, we're seeing manufacturers are finding out that we need to partner, we need to create tools to be able to work with third-party manufacturers, with third-party control systems. The problem, though, is that right now, like you were talking about, resources aren't always there to be able to execute everything necessary. And so companies like Control Concepts just announced today that they became an official QSys partner, a development partner, along with our good friend Ollie Hall over at Ultimation. And really this is the question, because again, it's great to have a manufacturer representative on board. How do you find bridging that gap when you do have the control systems out there, and Atlas has great relationships with a lot of the control manufacturers along with your own ecosystem, partnering, and how does it become a matter of how do you deal with it from a product development standpoint, going, okay, we've got to deal with our own APIs, we've got to deal with our own control interface. What do we have to do when we get a request from them saying, oh, by the way, we've got 15 touch panels in this combined space already, and we've got this university or something that's already been outfitted for X number of years, because from the control system programming standpoint, right, it's like, okay, well, you call companies in like ours, right, and you've got companies who do one-offs. I dip my foot in both sides on the resi and the commercial space. Resi has a whole different list of demands, but commercial, you're talking, I know, especially with Atlas, you've got, possibly an airport, you've got, universities, you've got school systems, you've got K-12, you've got transportation hubs, you're across so many different verticals.
So I started in the airport stuff. I started on the IED banner, and we have, the transportation side of AtlasIED now is 80% of the U.S. market of airports, and it is really hard to separate that customized stuff out, because you can walk into an airport, and they say, even airport to airport, they say, no airport. When you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport.
What's the great thing about standards? There's so many to choose from.
Seriously.
So that's our struggle now, is trying to standardize and have a good kind of base of product line, but yet still maintain that customization and that thing where you walk into someplace, they may have something built 40 years ago. How do you work with it?
Well, people say to us all the time, it's a typical boardroom, it's a typical home, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
this will be easy for you.
Yes, yeah.
So one of the things that we try to advocate for, and we talk about a lot on the show, is really we have to grow up as an industry a little bit.
Yes.
We need to start to adopt more modern software development practices.
Absolutely.
We need to look at things beyond just our four walls.
Yes.
Is that something that you can speak to for our audience and help them?
I started out in 2004, and our system was based on DOS. So I understand.
We've both been
We've
there.
both been there.
I understand how to even at that time that was old. So how to push that envelope a little bit. And when you have kind of a traditionally, I don't want to say it negatively, because traditional audio 70s hi-fi guys, or whatever you would say, like when you're trying to get those people kind of, look, this may work, a bunch of buttons and knobs and like a little tweak here and a tweak there, but today and with IT, if somebody has to do that, they'll just walk away, and it's a struggle. So to speak to it as far as like the way I'm trying to push it, or what I'm trying to do, I know that there's not a lot of stuff I don't understand, and I know that we are not Google, but I want to try to at least try and push things a little bit more on. whatever the trend is. So encouraging our teams to have up-to-date knowledge on cloud-based stuff, or